If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Truckers, what is something scary, eerie you have witnessed driving at night that gave you chills? Not a trucker anymore, but I was for 5 years from March 2016 to November 2017. I live in Santa Catarina, a cold state in Brazil, and there is a lot of myth and folklore in my region, South Brazil, about demon possession, Satanism, black magic, devil worshippers and stuff like that, and sometimes some of these myths are real. My grandfather has a small business, and in 2015 I had no job and decided to work with him. I worked in the office, but some time later we need to deliver stuff to a neighbor state, and I became the one that would do that. I would deliver from East Santa Catarina to West Rio Grande do Sul, like 800 kilometers, driving like 13 hours on the wheel, and I did it a lot of time, these delivers, and one of them something happened. It was July 2016, I was in Cachoeira do Sul, a small town in Rio Grande do Sul, and I was going to Cordillera, another small town. It was night and I was alone on the road driving, and I saw some light in the wood and some shadows. My curiosity made me stop and try to peep to figure out what it was. As I was entering the woods, I saw a bunch of folks in white cloths with a fire, dancing and sing some stuff with dead animals and blood and small guns and what seemed like a human body cut it in half. Some friend of mine were from Voodoo, Candomblé and Umbanda, and what I saw in the wood was nothing like it. That seems like something out of horror movie. You know, I was deeply terrified, and soon I got back to the truck. I flee faster than I could. After that I comment that with some folks in Cachoeira do Sul, like the owner of the place where I had my dinner that night, and they said that what I saw was normal there and that happened often in West Rio Grande do Sul. It was one of the most creep stuff that I saw in my life, and today when I driving alone I never stop the car near of the woods because of that. North of Fairbanks, AK. I was pulled off the side of the road to perform and check of my hazmat load I just picked up 30 minutes prior. It was in January. It was clear. It was bitter cold. It was very dark. This stretch of highway was pretty desolate and with a long straightaway in both directions. The check was uneventful with no vehicles passing me the whole 10 minutes I was out of the cab. I rounded the front of my truck to climb back in. As I grabbed the handle to step up in the cab, I heard a noise sorta like a growl and laugh. The closest thing I could compare it to would be how the devil would be depicted of laughing in a movie. I paused and looked around and thought maybe I was hearing things. I got inside the cab and logged my check. That's when I looked over to the passenger side window and seen 3 bright lights exit from the tree line, about 50 feet away, and just hover next to my passenger door's window. The pace at which they closed that distance was amazing. I can't accurately tell you how long they were hovering there. 5 seconds? 30 seconds? It seemed like time just froze for me. Never experienced that feeling before. Then in an instant they shot to the back of the truck and just fucking disappeared. As I was putting it into gear, after realizing what I had just witnessed, I heard a couple loud bangs on my driver's door like someone was hitting it. I flipped on my accessory backing lights as I drove off, and there was nothing or nobody there. To this day, I refuse to stop anywhere near the area where I had experienced that. I'm surprised that little to no one has mentioned getting black dogged during long hauls. Black dogged is a term used when sleep-deprived drivers hallucinate and see animalistic shadows in running alongside them. It's an urban legend. The black dog is associated with truckers who've exhausted themselves to the point that they're falling asleep at the wheel. The black dog is often described as the shadow of an animal running next to or in front of the driver's truck, either waking them up or causing them to crash. If you die, they take your soul. When I was a kid, my father told me about a few experiences he and a few other trucker friends would have with these shadows. He and my grandfather used to do cross-country long hauls. If you speak to some OG truckers, you'll most likely get the faster we deliver a haul, the more money we make talk, which was often resulted in severe deprivation of sleep. He wasn't afraid of much, but he knew it was time to stop when he started getting black dogged. Thankfully there's more laws and regulations in place now that prevent truckers from driving for too long and hurting themselves or others, and they're starting to receive a fairly steady rate. Back in the 80s my daddy would sometimes go trucking when his union went on strike. The story that has stuck with me was about a dark night. It's been so long I can't remember if he told me any details about where or when. He passed away a few years ago, and I'm not a necromancer, so I can't ask him to fill in the gaps. Sorry about that. He told me he was driving a semi, as I mentioned, and alongside of him, on the other side of some kind of fencing, he saw a metal bull. I suppose it was reflecting some kind of light to appear metallic. Maybe his light shone on it, or maybe the moon was full. That's all speculation. I do know he called it a metal bull. The thing is that he was driving pretty fast. My daddy was a terrible driver. He even bought radar detectors when they became available. So he had to be going a pretty good clip. The bull stayed right next to him, heading up along that fence line as fast as he was driving. Then the fence took a sudden and straight shot off to the right as fences do. The bull instantly made the turn without slowing down. It freaked my daddy out, but that is all that I really know. I asked about such things a while ago on Reddit and someone mentioned something about a ghost bull that haunts some highway out there. Maybe that's it. My father, around 20, is driving along with Ray, his best friend, bullshitting. It's around 3 o'clock in the morning, not a soul awake, when all of a sudden a red ball pops out into the road, along with a little 6 to 7-year-old boy. There is absolutely no time to stop. My father and Ray don't even have long enough to brace for impact, when the car plows into the kid. Then through him. When my dad looked in the rearview mirror, the little boy is standing there, looking back at them from the road, smiling. Ray turns and sees the boy as well, asking my father if he saw that too, which he obviously says yes. Turns out, in a neighboring town of where I used to live, New Jersey, there was a tale of that outside of a school. I cannot remember if it was closed down or still open at this time, where a ghost boy will run across the road in front of your car, chasing a red ball. This came about because of a little boy unfortunately dying from chasing his bouncy toy into the street during recess. My father knew of this story but doesn't believe in the paranormal. This was his first experience with anything ghostly and would very openly admit if he was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, which he has admitted to before. I'm not a trucker, but I do have a weird story about something I saw on the road. It was back in high school. My school started at 7:30 a.m. so I'd get there around 6:30 a.m. to do homework. I'm a morning person, so it was never really an issue. So I had just pulled up in front of the school and I was sitting at a stoplight in a turning lane, and on the other side of the road, in the opposite turning lane, there was a pearl white luxury SUV and the interior was gray leather and the lighting in that had almost a blue tint. In the car was a girl with blonde hair and a messy bun doing her makeup in the mirror. Now it's important to note that I saw all this out of my peripheral as I was just staring at the stoplight. It's also important to know that we were the only 2 cars on the road. So I was looking at the light and I blinked and the car was gone, like it had never even been there. It was there 1 second and gone the next. Something like this happened again a couple months later. Again, same story. I was driving to school. It was around 6:20 a.m. and I was on the highway leading up to my school. Again, as it was early, there weren't any cars on the road. So I was driving down the highway, and in the lane next to me there was a old-timey looking semi-truck with a wooden crate back. The truck itself was a matte red. So again I was looking at this truck in my peripherals, and this time without blinking I turned to look at the truck and it was gone the second I had focused on it. It just disappeared. So I've never been able to explain what the heck these occurrences were, and I'll probably never have an answer. Not a trucker, but I've never had the opportunity to share this, and hopefully someone has some answers. While this story may seem like it's not that creepy, it was insanely creepy for my friends and I. A few months ago, me and about 5 friends rented a car and took a 10-hour road trip up to New Jersey for a music festival. We chose to leave out late, like 9 p.m. so that we could avoid most of traffic by driving through the night. After driving through Ohio and parts of West Virginia, we were in Pennsylvania. Somehow or another my buddy's GPS was set to avoid toll roads, so we ended up driving back roads for close to 50 miles through Pennsylvania. Now growing up in Kentucky, back roads are not scary to us anymore, we've seen it all. After a while we started driving through these small isolated towns, tons of houses, but no gas stations, stores, etc. It was around 2 to 3 a.m. at this point, and we noticed that none of those houses had lights on in the houses, and none of them had cars in the driveway. Yes, it was very early in the morning, but for not a single house to have a kitchen light or porch light on or something felt really odd. The weirdest part was that every house we passed had a candle in every window. For being 6 adult men, we were all pretty creeped out and didn't really know why. The candles in the windows was what really kind of creeped us out for some reason. Does anyone know what those mean? Not me, but this is a story my dad told me about 10 to 15 years ago. In the 5-mile radius by our house, there is a certain intersection where a lot of car accidents have happened. Unfortunately, some of those instances were fatal. My dad worked the later shift at a nearby company, typically from 3 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. To get to work every day, he has to drive past this intersection, and one day when he was coming home after midnight, he stopped at the red light and noticed something odd. There was a woman in a white gown standing next to a bush. Just standing there by herself, with her face down. The light turned green, so he kept going and figured it was just a random occurrence. But the next night, he saw her standing there. And the night after that. And the night after that. And the night after that. At this point, he hadn't told anyone about it, but he was starting to get freaked out and talked to my mom. My mom of course freaks out too and put a religious symbol in his car. After she did that, he drove by the intersection the next night and never saw her again. Now we all have religious symbols in our car and thankfully I've never seen anything like that. One night I was driving to a GF's house about 10 years ago. This was on the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina. I lived about 20 miles from her, so the easiest route was down this long dark road that went past Magnolia Plantation. The road has no lights, or it didn't then, and is just a couple old plantations/tourist traps and thick trees on both sides. Also old decaying, abandoned houses back among the trees. I was driving and finally passed the sign for Magnolia and thought, good, I'm halfway there. Drove a bit more and once again, passed the same sign. It's a very obvious sign. Decided that if I passed the sign again I would pull over and alert the 911 operator that I seemed to be having a bit of an episode. Luckily I didn't pass it again. I hate that road though, it's just so dark and I swear I've seen people in the trees. And once a horse going down the road that disappeared. I used to drive snowplow on the 175, in the province of Quebec. A 200 kilometers highway between Quebec and Saguenay. This used to be a deadly road before because it was a single road with face-to-face lane. One night, during a really heavy snowstorm, I was making my way. The road was closed to traffic because of the storm. But we had to stay on the road in case of emergency. I was going light off. Only my strobe's lights were flashing. We see far and better like this. I was in a curve when I saw on a snow pile off the road a man standing. Only a cap and a t-shirt. Looking at me. I remember seeing his flashing shadow behind him from my strobe light. Stopped 50 feet in front of him and opened my backup light. To see nothing. Absolutely nothing. The other snow plow behind was coming up to me, so I asked him if he saw something on the side of the road. I'd say no. Next summer I went to the Bagotville Air Show from Quebec and saw, at the exact same place I saw him across. It was covered in the snow, so we don't see them in the winter. A young man died in a car accident right where I saw the man in the winter. Still give me chills. A couple of years ago I was taking some classes at an extension of a local college. The campus was spread out and had buildings in the town 35 miles from home. One class got out late and usually left me getting home around midnight. This particular night I stopped by Walmart to pick up some groceries because midnight shopping is the best because there is no crowd. It was late January and the weather was extremely cold. The inversion was bad and the fog that settled in was unusually thick. There were patches of clarity that showed that there was no moon that night. I have driven the road a million times and even with the fog could identify my location easily. As I came around a corner the road came up a big hill and then gradually headed south. The road was wide, but was surrounded by a shallow canyon. As I was leaving the canyon, I came into a patch of fog that was so dense that I had to slam on the brakes because I could not see more 10 feet in front of me. The fog caught all the stray light in the area and immediately illuminated everything with a bright orange glow. Suddenly I see something dart in front of my car. It was on hands and feet, but looked like it belonged on its hind legs. Its forelegs were short and covered with dense fur, and its hind legs were too long for it to be something that usually stood on 4 feet. Its hind legs were also covered in dense fur, but it had loose flowing skin. My first thought was that I almost missed hitting a little boy that was playing in the road, except the boy was covered in fur. I stopped the car and watched as the creature ran across the road loping along with very childlike movements. My heart was pounding and I waited to see what it would do next. It padded off the side of the road and climbed up the embankment on the other side. Once atop, it turned and looked at me. It had a cat-like face, but once again looks like a boy in costume or pajamas. It was clearly an animal, but it was so human-like it scared me for weeks after. I looked up images on Google and came to the conclusion it was a juvenile bobcat with some with extremely disproportionate legs, but something about it still unsettled me. A few weeks had passed, and I had forgotten most of it. Driving the same road in similar circumstances, I came upon the same patch of fog. It was so thick it was like someone had dropped a blanket over my car. I slowed to a crawl and looked for the road sign that signaled that I was halfway home. As I drove past it, I noticed a man leaning up against it. He wearing a gas mask from World War II. He looked directly at me and shook his head disapprovingly. I freaked out and picked up speed. I wanted nothing to do with whatever he was there for. Outside of the fog the night was crystal clear and then the moon was full, providing excellent visibility. As I made my way out of it, a few hundred yards later, there was a deafening crack. I instinctively slumped in my seat and thought I had been shot at. But there had been no other cars, no buildings and no other people around for at least 15 miles. A quick scan of my windows showed no cracks or holes. Panicking because I knew I was so alone, I sped up the car. A second or two later there was another deafening crack. Then a third, then a fourth. Suddenly, my windshield was cracked with lines through every portion of it except the driver's side. The windshield was only a few months old, and had no chips, bubbles, cracks or flaws before that night. The next morning, I looked at my windshield. There were obvious impact marks in 4 to 5 places, but it was impossible to know that they came from. After the inversion cleared that winter, I never had another unusual experience on that road, but it still creeps me out to drive it at night in the winter. Not a truck driver, and this happened in 1998. I was 12 and we were moving from Indiana to New Mexico in early mid-June. We were moving ourselves, so we had 2 of the biggest U-Haul trucks you can get with a trailer on each. One had a sailboat that my grandpa gave us, the other had our minivan. Both trucks were full. We were just outside St. Louis, Missouri, and it was kind of an overcast rainy day. I was in the truck with my mom driving while my dad was in the truck behind us with my little brother. We communicated via CB radios. The highway was pretty packed but moving nicely. Suddenly this jackass comes speeding up next to us at an insane speed and starts trying to push us off the road. We were on the outside lane, and right to the right of us was a pretty steep hill that went into some forests. This jerk in, I want to say, a truck towing a decent sized boat legit was trying to push us off the road so hard that the truck literally tilted up off of the 2 left wheels, and we tilted over the edge of the hill as this monster sped by us. I know this because I saw the hill looming below me, and my dad and brother saw everything from the truck directly behind us. Luckily we did not go over the edge, and the truck was able to get back on all its wheels. My mom and I were absolutely terrified. She said she looked at me and I was as white as a sheet. I had never been that scared in my life, to my knowledge. The people who drove up next to us after the crazy PPL had sped off ahead, weaving through traffic faster than everyone else, gave us this weird look like, "WTF were you doing?" Like we were in the wrong. That still pisses me off 21 plus years later. We were able to get off at the next exit and went to a truck stop where I was shaking like a leaf and my mom had a panic attack. I'm pretty sure I had a mild one as well. We came out relatively unscathed, but yeah, whoever that was can fuck the fuck off forever. I was driving along this path with a mountain on one side and a really steep drop on the other, probably about an 80 degrees drop down 7 stories. I want to emphasize that nothing is getting up that hill. It was snowing and I couldn't see anything in front of me, as there were no street lamps, and it was about 11 p.m. in the middle of winter. I hear a noise from the bottom of the drop. I brush it off as a sheep or something like that, and I keep driving. I was also really scared as it is, as my truck is pretty hefty and it was a slim road at night, so I just assumed my brain was messing with me. I was driving along this trail for a few more minutes. I could hear the noise again. This time it felt closer, but still quite far at the bottom of the mountain, so I brushed it off yet again. Not even 10 seconds later I hear the exact same noise, yet it was so close. I was fucking mortified. I don't know what came over me, but I stopped and got out of the truck. The noise was getting louder, and I peered over the edge of the hill. My heart skipped several beats. I got back in my truck immediately and floored it. What I saw was this fucking question posted here again. Haven't driven along there since. Wouldn't call myself a trucker, but have about 100,000 miles under my belt so far, off and on over the last 5 years, but this story happened when I wasn't in a semi, but at the time I was living in North Dakota, and had family in Indiana, and was on my way back from Indiana. They were predicting a snowstorm Saturday afternoon, so I decided to leave as the snow was starting, which I admit wasn't the smartest idea, but I'm a competent driver and wasn't in a hurry, so I figured I could take things slow and don't have to push it. But things were slow going through Illinois as expected, but the weather cleared up once I started heading north, and things were fine for a while. Now skip forward to Minnesota. Now I should say, I had woke up about 7 a.m. on Saturday, and left Indiana at about 5 p.m., and rolled through Minneapolis at about 3 a.m. local time Sunday morning, and only saw one car driving around in town. But that's not the crazy part. I get to Fergus Falls, which is my exit, at about 5:45 a.m., and the Sunday drivers are just starting to get out and driving. I look to my left just trying to pass the time, and notice a reflection in my window from the right side of the vehicle. So I look over, half expecting to miss what it was since I had the cruise set to 75 miles per hour. I see a person walking, at a normal gait, like you'd see someone walking down the sidewalk, but they were matching my speed. Almost like they were skating along. It's very hard to explain. So I stop at a gas station that was at my exit to use the facilities and get a drink and explain what happened to the male, this is important, attendant, since there was no one else in the shop, and he could tell I'd been awake for 23 hours at that point, or it was his stock response for someone seeing the same thing. but as soon as I explained it his face went blank, asked how long I'd been awake, and asked where I was from. I answered his questions, and without time to think he told me to get on the road, go home, sleep, and don't talk to anyone around there about what happened that night. So I did, but it kept bugging me what had happened. So time comes for me to head back to Indiana for some family time, and I get the idea to leave early in the morning to go past that exit at roughly the same time, and even stopped at that gas station at roughly the same time. So I get to the station and there was a woman behind the counter this time. So I asked the girl behind the counter where the morning guy went, and she said she has worked the morning shift, 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. 7 days a week for the previous 2 years, never missed a day, and didn't know who I was talking about, and didn't remember seeing me in there. So I didn't say any more, thanked her for the coffee I had bought, and made my way to Indiana and never told a soul, until now. One night, I was hauling sulfuric acid from the rail siding to the mine site. Normally do 3 loads a shift, so it was pretty full on. First load of the night, and I get overtaken by a Commodore full of Aboriginals. Now, country Australians will recognize the type. No windows, because they're all smashed, only one headlight, no tail lights, and a stream of empty VB cans falling out. A few km down the road, they're stopped off the side of the road trying to flag me down. "Hey brother, we got no petrol. Can you give us some?" "Well, actually, no. I run on diesel, you need petrol." "Nah brother, that's okay. We only going to Laverton." "Yeah, nah, ain't gonna happen. Sorry guys." Take off again, warning everyone about the carload of Aboriginals right on the side of the highway. Heading back after the first load, and they start jumping onto the road, trying to make me stop. Not happening guys. Pull on the air horn and drive straight towards them. Sure enough, I'm still 200 meters away when they run off the road. I got back to rail, and rang the coppers in Leonora, and they promised to send a car out. Heading out on the second load, and the coppers overtake me before I get there, so no troubles when I went past. Coming back from the second load, coppers are just leaving, and the Aboriginals have gotten a fire going and pushed the Commodore well off the road. Third load, and by now it's nearly 3 a.m. Figured it'd be a nice, quiet run. Not fucking likely. Now, for a bit of information, this is a fully loaded, triple trailer road train grossing 147 tons, and coming in at about 40 meters long. Say 325,000 pounds, and 130 feet for our American brethren. I'm doing 90 kilometers per hour approaching the broken down Commodore, and the fire's burnt low, and it looks like they're all asleep. Then I notice a dark patch in the middle of my lane. I figure it's probably a dead kangaroo, and so I move over to the opposite lane to avoid it. I shit you not. This dark pile jumps up out of my original lane, runs over, and lies down in the middle of the opposite lane, directly in my path. So I move back to my correct lane. And the pile jumps up, runs over, and lies down in his original spot. I start slowing down, spotlights shining, and grab a hold of the damn air horn cord again. I slowly start to swerve into the oncoming lane again, and a second dark pile jumps up off the side of the road, runs out and lies down in this lane. So, now I've got 2 lumps to avoid. So, I just gave in to the inevitable. I took my foot off the brakes, slammed the throttle to the floor so hard I nearly punched it through the firewall, and aimed for the gap between them. Never let go of the air horn, that was just screaming to the world that I was coming. Well, fuck me. There's not enough room between them for me to fit through. And I'm committed, there's no way I can stop in time. So, I just screwed up my eyes and kept rolling. Thank fuck these boys gave in. Right at the last second, they both bailed off the road and disappeared into the bush. But, I'm willing to bet they never tried that shit again. I'm a truck driver and I drive between Vancouver and Whitehorse. Both in Canada if you're unaware. So I do this route quite often and it is quite a long trip, a bit over a day. So this one time after about 12 hours into driving I pulled into a rest stop to get something to eat and get some sleep and all that. So I got something to eat, then went back to my cab to take a nap. So as I'm trying to fall asleep, I hear a car door close behind my truck. So I looked in my rearview mirrors and I see 2 people getting out of the car and start walking towards the cab as if they were trying not to be noticed. Then out of the corner of my eye I noticed one of them was carrying some sort of rifle. I don't know much about guns so I can't tell you what kind, and the other had some sort of pistol. So at that time it was my first reaction to turn on the truck and get out of there, and that's what I did. So I hauled as fast I could for about 10 minutes down the road, then I pulled over and called the cops and explained what happened. So about 10 minutes later a cop came up to me and explained to me what was happening. So it turns out that there were 2 people who were on a killing spree in the area who 100% had killed people. So who knows, maybe those 2 were the killers. I'm not a truck driver but I drive quite a bit and I've seen some things. About 25 years ago, I was about 30 miles from home at a Home Depot getting some home DIY. I felt my gut gurgling and liquefy, so I dropped everything and stupidly didn't use the restroom there. I was sure I could get home. About 30 miles, but I could do it. I'm doing pretty well, got a good clench happening and traffic is good. I'm on the 101 in CA and there are 2 or 3 cars ahead of me when suddenly the car directly in front of me essentially pulls a pit maneuver on the car in front of it. Due to how fast we were all going, it launches the 2 cars into the most spectacular car crash I've ever seen right before my eyes as my bowels just explode unrelenting diarrhea. I'm going 60 miles per hour and my jeans just fill with hot feces. The shock of seeing the accident made me shit. I shat so very much. I wanted to pull over and help the people I'm sure are severely injured or dead, but I had to speed by in my own mess, having the most conflicting and confusing feelings. It was absolutely humiliating and yet humbling at the same time in many ways. So far, that's the worst thing that's happened on the road to me. It was just awful. Is it okay to tell a story where I was not the trucker, but victim to something very creepy from a trucker? So, my boyfriend and I were driving on this empty country road pretty late at night, on a weekend day around 11 p.m. We're going at the speed limit, 70 kilometers per hour. A semi catches up to us from behind and tailgates us so closely we can't even see his front license plate through our back window. There was maybe a distance of 2 meters between our vehicles. Not safe at all. So my BF, who's driving, tips on the brakes just enough to make the brake lights go on for a second to signal to the semi to back off a bit, which is perfectly legal here in Germany. The semi does indeed back up for a moment, but then closes up on us again almost immediately. My BF again uses the brake, this time for a little longer to gently slow us down to 60 kilometers per hour. Semi reacts the same way again, but leaves a tiny bit more space between the vehicles this time. Still by far not enough to be safe. We just speed up to 70 kilometers per hour again and hope we can lose this idiot soon when turning onto the freeway/autobahn. So after maybe 2 kilometers or so, we reach the freeway. To get onto it, we need to take a left turn off the country road and into the entrance ramp. In the left turn lane in front of us is another semi, which we hadn't noticed anywhere in front of us before, so he must have been quite a long way ahead of us, but whatever, right? Doing the left turn very slowly, and I think, maybe he carries some sensitive load, whatever, we're not in a hurry. So we slow down too, and follow the semi into the freeway entrance ramp. The other semi behind us follows suit. In the curve of the entrance ramp, the semi in front of us slows down even more and finally comes to a full stop. We have to stop, too, obviously. For a second I'm thinking, damn, what's wrong now, how annoying, until I notice that the semi behind us has closed up on us and blocked us in. Let me paint you a picture of this situation. It's 11 p.m., pitch black outside, in the middle of fucking nowhere, with no cars around wide and far. We're on this curved entrance ramp, to the left and right there are guardrails and behind those just dense thicket with bushes maybe 2 to 3 meters high. We're in my tiny little Chevy Aveo, wedged in between 2 huge semis, who are by the way positioned so that there's no way for us to get by them, even in my tiny car, and have just had some kind of non-verbal altercation with one of them. Yeah, that's when my heart started racing and I wondered if police could take less than 30 minutes to arrive if we called then. Thankfully my BF had the presence of mind to lock our doors, yay for central locking system, because just seconds later the driver from the semi behind us, the tailgating asshole, came stomping up to our car, hammering against the driver's side window and trying to fucking yank the door open. Being unsuccessful, he angrily screamed at my BF to come out and talk about this. Haha, yeah, sure, we'll jump right out. Meanwhile I'm in full stress mode, fumble my phone out of its mount and try to get it to stop navigation and start filming with trembling hands. When I finally manage it, the angry asshole trucker has apparently given up and is stomping back to his truck. After a few seconds, the semi in front of us starts moving again, and finally we're free to go and enter the freeway. Honestly, that was one of the scariest moments of my life, and I'm just thankful to live in Germany where people don't run around carrying firearms everywhere. I worked as an assistant driver with my father for a few summers, paid under the table basically. We were the overnight delivery crew, or at least part of that shift. This meant that any warehouse or office space we delivered to either had to have someone there past midnight or gave the drivers a key. Only one of our stops didn't give us a key. We delivered all over the East Coast. Obviously I won't be saying what company this was for, however I will say that we had a specific few areas we delivered to: Philadelphia, New York, only about once a month, Camden, Newark, Jersey City, and many others. A lot of the company's clients were in NJ however. But I digress. Over the 3 summers I worked with my dad we had plenty of weird experiences, People trying to hit us to wither rob us or for insurance, sketchy people in truck stops or 7-Elevens at 3 a.m, signs of attempted entry to the warehouses we delivered to, etc. There was only one that ever really bothered us. We delivered to a place in Philly. I'm not gonna go into specifics, and also the warehouse does not exist anymore or the company can't remember. But this part of Philly was very sketchy. The kind of part where even though you're 40 feet from the truck, take all your stuff out and lock the door kind of place. Anyways, we were unloading the trailer for this particular warehouse, and it was probably about 15 pallets, so a decent amount. Not even halfway into the unloading, we hear voices up the street. The lot for this warehouse was very small and these people were loud. We quickened the pace, as why is there a group walking down a pitch black highly industrial street past 3 a.m? Every few pallets we would stop and the voices would get louder. Finally my dad goes and starts the truck while I put the pallet jacks in, move the ramp we used and shut and lock the door. I was on the step when he started moving. As I got into the cab, we passed the entrance. There were probably 15 or so guys not even a block back. As we pulled away I saw a few go into the warehouse's yard, and the rest separated. Scary to think what could have happened to us. I love reading all these trucking tales. I have a soft spot on my heart for truckers. My husband decided that he was going to become a truck driver. He frequently tells me that he can't stand stupid people. This is why he quit a lucrative DoD contractor job. Stupid people. My papa has been a truck driver for over 50 years, and since there isn't much else to do when you grew up on a ranch that is also the remnants of an old western ghost town, we kids would take turns going on week-long road trips with papa. I told my husband that being a truck driver was one of the worst jobs if you can't stand stupid people, for you will learn that there are many stupid people who drive very little cars. And when you're in a semi, nearly all cars look little. That being said, Papa's scariest trucking tale didn't happen at night, it happened during the day. This was back when he hauled logs, and he had to bring them down steep rocky mountainsides from the cuting sites, with road grades over 12%. One day, with his window down to enjoy the fresh air, after it had been raining all night, he lost control of the truck on the mud on the steep grade. He rolled it. He was thrown out of the open driver's window. Since he wasn't wearing his seatbelt, it was the 70s, seatbelt safety wasn't quite the thing. The flatbed flipped over and that full load of logs crushed the cab flat. If he had been wearing a seatbelt, he wouldn't have been thrown out that open window, and he would have been crushed and killed. To this day, Papa still will not wear a seatbelt, making him one of the only few cases where someone legitimately lived for not being safe. He still drives the snow plow during the winter for the state highway department. He says the worst drivers are the Canadians. He hasn't quite forgiven the guy who broadsided him on the right when he was pulling off the road to plow the chain-up area, because the idiot tried to pass a snowplow on the right side of the road. Like, who does that? Stupid people in little cars. That's who. I'm not a truck driver, but I have a story about almost getting killed by one, if that counts, lol. So one weekend me and a friend tried to make a 24+ hour road trip from Colorado to Oregon with a detour in Montana, in the span of 2 days. In the middle of winter. The route we were taking was through the mountains the majority of the way, so we were either driving through snowstorms or ice-covered roads the entire time. Stupid, I know. I was more comfortable driving on ice, so I took over the wheel once the snow subsided. It was only the evening, but there weren't too many cars on the road given the weather. Nonetheless, everything was going smoothly until I spotted a truck parked in the middle of one of the lanes, halfway across a bridge. My nerves immediately started up, but I reassured myself that the trucker probably needed a rest from driving in such dangerous conditions. However, as soon as I entered the bridge, the truck suddenly turned on its engine and slowly began veering into my lane. It felt like there was nothing I could do. I couldn't change lanes because the truck was now taking up both, and I definitely couldn't hit my brakes because the extra ice from the bridge would surely spin us right off the cliff to tumble easily 2,000 feet down. The only option I had was to speed up, veer the car, and try to reach the end of the bridge before the truck finished changing lanes. Luckily, I was able to slide into a snow bank at the very last millisecond. The weird thing is, the sky was clear, albeit dark. I had my lights on, flashed my blights at the truck on the way towards it, and even honked when it began changing lanes. Yet it didn't stop to see if I was okay, and decided to change lanes right in front of the only car that was on the road. The fact that it was parked in the middle of a bridge is weird enough, but all of the other shit it did on top of that? I know he probably wasn't trying to murder me. For real, who would risk damaging their truck just to kill two strangers, and was just super drunk or tired? But come on, man. Not a trucker, but did a lot of night driving for work. Going 50 miles per hour up a hill in rural Maryland around midnight on a weekday. I notice rapid and nearby motion out the driver's side window and glance over just in time to see a perfectly lit buck with his antlers down charging the car window at a distance of about 4 inches. Nearly gave me a heart attack. I looked almost exactly at the time of impact. This deer was massive and it had a very large rack of antlers. His left antler impaled and removed my side mirror, and both antlers impacted the glass/door and scraped down the side of my car as his points started breaking off from the force of impact. The window held, but I had several bloody scrapes down the side of the car from the antlers, no mirror, and a huge dent where the body came around. He tried to put his ass through the back fender. I quickly pulled over and hopped out to see him stand up and prance away with my mirror housing still impaled by his mangled antlers. I've never hit a deer, but one damn sure hit me. 2. Driving from Flint, Michigan airport to St. Charles or some bullshit place near it around 1 a.m. on a weekday in the winter. This is a diagonal drive across a north/south grid of rural farm roads, so lots of turning left and right to work from one corner to the other. I come across a large truck parked across the road with all its lights removed. Not off, removed, so my lights weren't even reflect off anything. I nearly T-boned the thing going fast enough to die, but the rental had new tires and good brakes. Ditches on either side, so I can't go around, and I don't want to find out if someone is there that can move it, so I very quickly J-turn and backtrack to one of the many alternate routes that a grid system gives you. I'm already freaked out and hopped up on adrenaline from almost dying to what appears to be a trap. Not having cell signal, Google Maps is struggling, so I'm just kinda winging it to go vaguely knee and end up boxed in by a river and needing to backtrack south. What do I see but a truck barreling down the road at me with no headlights, just those old school roll bar lights, 4-circle lights. Sure, I'm going to be murdered by some Midwestern flatlander and caught in the middle of a straight road pointed right at them. I just immediately turn into the farmhouse right next to me. Those motherfuckers turned in right behind me. Luckily the driveway was a circle around a tree and I'd just popped out the other side and redlined that rental car until I made it to a road I knew would cross the river. Maybe it was a coincidence, but I really don't think it was. I'm not a trucker, but I have a story from my cousin. We live in Pennsylvania near the Keystone Restaurant and Truck Stop, but this happened about a few miles away more in town. She was on her way home from class, and she was first in line at the traffic light. It turns green. She starts to press her foot on the gas pedal so she can go, and out of nowhere, a semi-truck comes barreling through a red light. He almost killed her. If she had gone just a little faster, or if he had been there a mere few seconds before, he would have hit her going from the driver's side and likely killed her on impact. Seconds later, a police car came from somewhere and chased the trucker down. Unsure of why he was speeding through a 45 miles per hour area with 4 traffic lights in general, but he did it anyway. He may have been drunk or just an idiot driver who thought he could make it through a late yellow light, but regardless, it was a shit your pants moment, no doubt. Her father, an emergency responder and firefighter, told her to wait just a few seconds and make sure no one is still going through before you go on a green light. I follow that advice to the best of my ability. So does she. Not to mention, since our area does a lot of coal mining, we have a lot of coal truck accidents. I am terrified of coal trucks. I have passed by too many by the side memorials for people who have been hit by coal truckers. One exit we have is littered in traffic lights and caution signs because it's a common area for coal truck accidents. I wish they would do that more, because some areas it should be illegal to drive coal trucks on. Super dangerous. My dad said his coworkers plan their routes and scope them out because they're worried they'll get into a bad place and wreck. Needless to say, we aren't big fans of semi-trucks and tractor-trailers in general. Down here we get truckers who are just plain rude. So, honestly, I love whenever I hear stories about responsible drivers who do their best and err on the side of caution, follow the rules, etc. I avoid passing trucks on highways and I always keep a good distance from them if I can. I just feel super uncomfortable and I hate it when they pass you. I can literally feel the car being blown over by the wind to the side of the road when they do. My dad has been a truck driver for 30 plus years. He's never had any accidents until a few months ago. He works in the oil fields out in West Texas. There are lots of accidents in this area and many are fatal. So he was driving along the highway going about 70 miles per hour, which is the speed limit in this area. First he is nearly sideswiped. Then a few minutes later he sees a semi blow through a stop sign. Behind that semi is a Ford truck. The driver is looking at his passenger, isn't paying attention and passes the stop sign. He starts to brake, but of course my dad isn't able to stop in time, so turns his truck to the right and T-bones the truck on the rear passenger door. Drags the truck down the road into an intersection and nearly collides with another semi that was driving in the oncoming lanes. Both trucks are totaled. He showed me the video from his truck after, and holy crap, it was insane. The other driver clearly passes the stop sign and never looks to his left. My dad avoids hitting the driver's side door by just seconds. At time of impact, the front of his truck just explodes and the hood flies open, the windshield cracks and there's fluids just flying everywhere. Amazingly, his truck did not catch fire, and because of his quick actions, the two guys in the Ford truck lived. Had he not turned his truck when he did, they would have been dead on impact. My grandfather drove truck for most of his life, so did one of his brothers, and when they'd meet, they'd try to get the same load so they could spend time together. Well, they were both on their way to a truck stop one night when my grandfather, trying to make up time, told his brother over the CB he'd see him at the truck stop. They separated, and as my grandfather pulled into the truck stop and was waiting for his brother to show up. Well, he never did. Once there was distance between them, his brother's truck had broken down and forced him onto the shoulder, warning triangles and hazard lights on. Sometime later, another semi traveling at highway speeds crashed into the back of his trailer, sending it and the cargo directly into the cab of the truck, killing my grandfather's brother. My grandfather found out because he left the truck stop to find his brother, only to discover the aftermath of the wreck.